The house was plunged into deep mourning. The stifling smell of flowers and medicines made her short of breath. The clock was ticking away. Dinner time was approaching. Today was the 9th day since the funeral, but the occupants of the mansion still spoke in whispers. The old woman set the table in the dining room and lit the candles. For despite the day, it was cloudy outside the window. If earlier candles gave a mysterious and a little romantic look to the room, now the atmosphere seemed ominous. "Thank you, Fima," Alice thanked the woman dryly, sitting down at the table. She changed her usual jeans for a black dress and a scarf, which surprised the others. "Alice, you're sitting in the wrong place." "That's Grandma's seat," the other girl said softly. Steph looked at her sister with judgment. "I am the eldest now, and this is my place," said Alice haughtily. "If you think so, this is Euphemia's place," said Olga, the third sister. Her face was tearful, and her clothes were not fresh, as if she had slept in them. "There's more," Alice replied and started eating. The girls dined in silence. In the evening, some old acquaintances would come to remember Amalia, the former mistress of the house and the girl's grandmother. Fima put the dishes away, just as silently, and only Steffa nodded, letting her know she was ready for a conversation. Steffa went into the grandmother's study. Fima settled opposite in the armchair where Amalia used to sit. Alice and Olga went about their business in their rooms. "The food from the restaurant will arrive at 5. We'll have time for everything," Steph said. "Thank you for your help. Grandma really appreciated you. Your grandmother and I have known each other all our lives. You don't know that I'm her cousin," said Fima. Steffa froze and stared dumbfounded at the old woman. She remembered Fima from her childhood. She helped raise them, took care of the household and the house. Steffa had never been interested in the woman's biography. She had always been. "I see your reaction," Fima laughed. "Yes, our mothers are sisters, but mine died early and my grandmother raised me. Amalia got the gift of time, I got something else. My grandmother helped me develop the gift and learn to control it. I'm a clairvoyant. In your modern parlance, a witch. I can see the future, write spells, call upon the kin for help, call upon the dead for help or demons for small jobs. Amalia knew I wouldn't leave you, and where would I go? You're my family. You know, I'm glad you're a grandmother to us too," Steph smiled. "I don't doubt about you, but your sisters, that's a punishment. They'll be trouble." "What are you talking about, worried girl? Was this Anton at the funeral? He was at the cemetery, probably wanted to make sure she was dead. I think he was there though. You don't get it? I know that he killed her, with his magic." "Grandma left in her sleep," Steffa objected. "You are young and inexperienced. It's not for nothing that we made your powers go to sleep, or you would have made such a mess," grinned the old woman. "Anton has been obsessed with 3 things all his life: power, eternal life, and Amalia. Did he love her? Oh, he didn't just love her, he was obsessed with her. Amalia told you that he studied with our grandmother. He knew about the gift. Amalia gave you her powers when she died, you just don't realize it yet. He's gonna try to take those powers away from you. Either you give them to him willingly or he'll take them by force. But there must be something we can do. I can. Get stronger. You're just starting out and he's an experienced sorcerer. You don't have a sisterhood. That's bad, and worse, he knows it. I think he made contact with Alice, promised her something. What can you buy her with?" "Olga, I get it, she loves money. But she's a bit dazed now, probably worried," Steph said. "We'll study. I'll pass on what I can, what I have time for. But whether your sisters will study or not," Fima shook her head in doubt. Their conversation was interrupted by frightened screams coming from Alice's room. Steph rushed there, the old woman barely keeping up with her. When the girl ran into her sister's room, she didn't see her at first. The room was dark because of the curtains, the lights were off, the candles were out, and the overturned lamp was lying on the floor. Alice huddled in a corner, covering her face with her hands and sobbing deeply. Steph struggled to get her out of there and sat her on the bed. "What's wrong?" "There was someone here. A creature. It wanted to kill me. And the clock," muttered a frightened Alice. "What about the clock?" Steffa asked. There was an antique floor clock in the room, another hanging on the wall, and a small one on the table by the bed. It began to strike, but not in time, and the hands were fluttering about as if they were melting. Alice suddenly spoke calmly. "Here, have a drink." Fima held out a glass with a warm herbal decoction. "It's just herbs, it will put your nerves in order." "Thank you." The girl drank the potion in 2 gulps. "I'm scared, Steffa, I was so scared." "So there's no more protection," Fima said to no one in particular. Fima, what are you talking about? Amalia and I once put a powerful protection on the house. Some of the clocks act as amulets. If Alice saw and heard it strike at the wrong time, then the protection's been breached. Alice, do you know Anton? Steph suddenly asked her sister. Seeing how her face changed, I realized I had hit the mark. He first wrote me a letter and a note, then we met. He said Grandma was in mortal danger and only I could help her. He introduced himself as an old friend of hers and a friend of Grandpa's, Alice answered. I believed him. I didn't know about everything then, so I came. The other day he sent me a letter to the post office. What was in the letter? Fima asked. He offered a deal, we give up our own power and stay alive, or he would destroy us. I wrote him back rudely, sent him on a long hike. He must have taken offense, Steph grinned. Where's Olga? There was so much shouting that it must have been heard in the street, suddenly asked Fima. Her face became stern. There was no Olga in the room. Then they searched the whole house, but the girl was not found, nor was she in the garden. The clock chimed 5 o'clock in the house. The doorbell rang, bringing food from the restaurant. For the next hour, the girls and Fima prepared for a memorial dinner and did not worry about the sister. Little wonder, maybe she went somewhere and just did not warn them. Soon the guests gathered and sat down at the table. The dinner was peaceful and almost cozy. They remembered Amalia, what kind of person she was. Her business partners, a couple of old girlfriends, and a few acquaintances were also present. The doorbell rang again, and Stephanie went to open the door. Good evening, said hello to the imposing man on the threshold. May I come in? I don't have an invitation, but I don't think you'll chase me away. Anton? Steph guessed. Steffa, who is it? Alice asked, stepping out into the hall. Who is it? It's the famous Anton, said Steffa, nodding at the man. Well, why are we stomping on the doorstep? Come in. The rest of the evening, Anton sat silently with the guests, occasionally entering into conversation. He was introduced as Amalia's friend, and in a way, he was. Fima watched him with undisguised anger which she did not even try to hide. When the door closed behind the last guest, the girls returned to the living room. Anton stood by the large floor clock, scrutinizing it but not touching it. It was as if he feared the clock. Suddenly there was a loud strike of the clock. Everyone froze in bewilderment and fear. Anton slowly returned to his chair and took his glass with a drink. So why are you here? Steph started it. Get him out of here! Suddenly shouted Fima, the scoundrel. Euphemia, you haven't changed at all. Anton grinned. So why did you come? It seems not invited, and coming uninvited is not polite, Alice asked, folding her arms on her chest, and her face did not bode well. You wrote to me. I answered you specifically. What are you still not clear? Yes, she's like her grandmother. Of course I read your letter. Rude, but maybe fair. Basically, I've come to offer you a deal once again. The man has spoken. To give you a gift? Exactly. And I'll leave you alone. You'll live a normally prosperous human life. Why do you need this dangerous world of sorcery? Anton continued. Besides me, your gift can be taken by another person. By the way, very close to you. What are you saying? And who? Grinned Alice. Isn't it Fima we're talking about? Euphemia straightened up and pressed her lips together, ready to throw herself at Anton. Maybe. How long ago did the clock on the tower start chiming? He suddenly asked. Steph and Alice wondered. The clock on the tower tells the time, but it doesn't strike. Grandmother said that there was something wrong with the mechanism and it couldn't be fixed yet. What's that got to do with it? Steffa asked. Very much so. This clock is struck on special occasions. I know exactly what Amalia told you, and you believed it. She made me look like a monster. This is your doing, isn't it? The attack on Olga, today on Alice. Stephanie interrupted him. Attacks? Anton looked really surprised. I didn't attack anyone. If I had used my power, you wouldn't have been frightened. And there's no need for that yet. You have time to think. The clock is ticking. With these words, he stood up and headed for the exit. The girls followed. The man suddenly turned around on the steps and looked at them with a slight smile. Where is your third sister, Olga? Receiving no answer, he walked away, chuckling. Alice grabbed her phone and started dialing her sister's number. The phone kept saying that the caller was unavailable. Olga had 2 numbers, but neither was available. Gone and turned off her phone? Not typical for her, she never left her phone, she was an active social media user. Look, Alice shoved her phone at Steph. There was a picture of their garden on the screen, but it was gloomy, not alive. This was posted this morning. And here's another one. The second picture was taken in the house, on the stairs leading up to the clock tower. It wasn't captioned, but it was also posted this morning. Both girls stared at the picture. Could she be there? Steph asked quietly. Suddenly the light flickered and all the lamps went out at once. Thankfully, Grandma didn't like electricity and there were candles, lamps, and matches everywhere. Alice lit a lamp and her sister grabbed a flashlight. They went upstairs and the door was open, though it was usually locked and Amalia and Fima had the key, so someone had taken Amalia's key. When they entered the tower, they froze in consternation. The ancient clock mechanism shimmered with a bluish light, bright flashes flashed over the gears and other parts. The huge hands of the clock also glowed and moved slowly. There was a niche in the wall from which came a measured humming and ticking. The clock again. The girls gingerly approached the niche. On a small pedestal was a box where a round ball lay. It seemed to be red hot. Inside the ball were real, small lightning bolts. They glowed with blue and golden light. From the ball, there was this humming noise. The sisters looked at each other in bewilderment. They had no idea what it was. They had played in the tower sometimes when they were children, but then their grandmother had locked it up and never let them in again. Steph asked about the tower a couple times, but each time Amalia gave her a look that made her stop asking. "Steffa, look!" Alice pulled her to a dark corner of the tower where some sort of pile lay. Steffa came closer and cried out. Olga was lying on the floor in front of them. She wasn't moving. They rushed to her, checked her pulse. It was there. Together, they got her down to her room and called Fima. Euphemia examined the girl. Together, they undressed her and put her in bed. Olga was still unconscious. Fima whispered something over her, putting her hand on the girl's forehead. Olga lay pale like a dead doll. Alice and her sister were holding hands. For the first time in their lives, they were real sisters, worried about their third sister. She crossed the line. Olga went through a time portal. She's there now, and I don't know if she'll be able to come back, Fima spoke. She looked tired and downcast. What's the matter? I can't bring her back. I don't have the gift of time control. But you do, said Fima. When Amalia and I decided to hide your powers, we put them in an orb. It's not just a glass ball, it's a magical artifact. I think Olga found it. Why did she even go in there? Is it useless to call an ambulance? Alice asked. Why? They won't do anything but stick their needles in, replied Fima grumpily. Let's wait. Steffa and Alice stayed in their sister's bedroom, sitting in an armchair and on a small sofa, and Euphemia was sent to her room. In the house there was the thud of the clock, midnight.